The 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination just happened the other day. Mm-hmm. He was killed in Memphis, Tennessee. So, brothers, I just want to talk about what does Martin Luther King mean to you, his movement, how does it affect you today? Just say anything about, what I mean, your thoughts on Martin Luther King. Jerry, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, Dr. King is somebody who, is just an incredible leader and, famous person who really did a lot. And I'll, kind of talk about how I came to appreciate him. Years ago, I used to be like, yo, Martin who? Like, I bought the sanitized, the homogenized version of Dr. King that the media likes to portray, right? So when you listen to Dr. King, people are just listening to I Have a Dream, right? And so they reduce him to somebody who just marched. And when I was immature, I looked at, Malcolm X as that person who, should be in the public's vanguard like King was. Now, as I've matured historically and I've analyzed the life of Dr. King, I come to appreciate who he was, like, even more. Like, this is a brother who literally was extraordinarily gifted. I mean, he started college at the age of 15 years old, right? He had his PhD by the time he was 24, right? And so this was a brother with enormous gifts. And he comes, like, firmly out of the African-American tradition. His father was a preacher. His grandfather was a preacher. His great-grandfather was a preacher. His brother was a preacher, right? So he was somebody that, like, really didn't just come through by themselves, right? He had a whole environment, a whole community that made him who he was, right? So, we think of these people as like, oh, they're once in a generation. Nah, like Dr. King was somebody who was developed in the person that he was. And so another thing I like about Dr. King is like, he was at the right place at the right time, but he was prepared. I had a mentor that told me, he graduated from Morehouse, James G. And he said, to be prepared for the opportunity you can't see. Dr. King was prepared, right? He went and got his paper. He went and got his PhD. When he graduated, when he was about to graduate, he started looking around for a job. And so he wanted to be a preacher. And so he started applying, to different churches to be a preacher. And he ended up going to Montgomery, Alabama. Now, would he know that he would end up being the president of the Montgomery I think it was the Montgomery Improvement Association? Nah, he just happened to be like at the right place at the right time, and he was prepared. And this is a brother who sacrificed. I mean, listen, he was somebody who had a PhD. He was smart. He was an articulate person. He spoke well. He could have had much easier jobs than being in Montgomery, Alabama. Like, he could have been president of college. He could have been a professor in the North. He could have kind of chilled. He could have said, when he was like 24, 23 when he started the Montgomery bus boycott. This is a brother who, like, understood what he was doing. Like, some of his speeches, he had a speech that I think everybody should listen to. He has a speech called Why Jesus Called a Man a Fool. And that's on YouTube. You can listen to it. And, he breaks down, like, how he was scared, right? How he was scared, how people were, like, threatening his family, how, they were going to blow up his house. In fact, he said he got a phone call one night. He said it was around midnight. Somebody picked up the phone and called him and said, if you don't get out of town, we're going to blow up your house. And he was like, I was scared, but I couldn't call my dad. I couldn't call my mom. My mom and my dad are 175 miles away in Atlanta. I had to call on Jesus. This stuff was like real.
Yeah.
And this man paid the ultimate sacrifice. And the thing what people got to understand, when he died, he was one of the most hated Americans. He was somebody who, like, did not care about what people thought. Like, he really stood for something. I could talk all day.
You think there was a connection between John F. Kennedy's assassination and Martin Luther King?
I think all this stuff is connected. I don't think in history there's nothing happens on accident. Nothing happens. There are people, I will say this. James Bevel, who was a civil rights person, he said, ain't no way a 5-cent white boy killed $1 million black man, right? And so I don't believe that the story that the government is saying, like, from what I understand, if I'm recalling this correctly, the cops showed up minutes after he was shot.
Already ready.
Oh, they were ready. And not even that. They were listening. Like, there's a brother named Ralph Abernathy, who was like his homeboy. That's another thing I like about Dr. King.
Well, I say something.
Yeah.
Ralph David Abernathy.
Yeah.
Abernathy Drive.
Yeah, that's another thing I like about Dr. King. Like, he had a squad. Like, people think of Dr. King as just like one person. Nah, like, he had a whole squad, and he had people follow him. Like, because most people think, oh, I'm a leader, but if you ain't got nobody following you, you ain't a leader.
Right.
So like, he had James Bevel, he had Ralph Abernathy, he had Jesse Jackson, he had Andrew Young, he had Hosea Williams.
Drop them MLK gems.
Yeah, I'm serious. He had a whole squad, and I think that people think that they can get to the mountaintop by themselves. And Dr. King was like, nah, I had a whole squad, and he had people who disagreed with him. You know what I mean? Jesse Jackson, like when you read their biographies, like Jesse Jackson was just like admired him, was bothering him, like, you know what I mean? It's a funny story. So I love history, so I read a lot. So I know a lot about the nuances, the backstories, you know what I mean? Hosea Williams, give a shout out to Hosea Williams. He's somebody who's a giant. Dr. King was not just a leader, he was a developer of leaders.
Right.
And I can respect that. So, like I said, I could talk about this all day because that's your guy. That's my guy. And there's other, but also I was just listening to Ralph David Abernathy. I was just listening to Fred Shuttlesworth. I mean, these are people who changed America. Mm-hmm. Like, before Dr. King came around and led the civil rights movement, you couldn't go to the bathroom in a public place in the South. Like, you couldn't get a drink of water. Mm. Like, literally, we were on the back of the bus. And Dr. King said, I'm going to change that. And I think that, it's just incredible. And I'm a big fan of how he had his squad and how they had a plan. So,
oh, man.
It's like they said, this is 50th anniversary. I'm 34.
50 years.
I wasn't there. I didn't have to live through that. And, just like you brought up.
A phone call saying somebody can blow your crib up?
Literally. And just like you mentioned Malcolm X, when we was young, I think they kind of put them against each other. So we sitting there like Malcolm and Martin. We should never ask that question.
And another thing, these brothers were young. Dr. King was 39 years old. So you got to think about this. Think about this. Dr. King's granddaughter is 6 years old.
Mm. Right, we think that all of this, like slavery and all of these things that happened was so long ago. No, they're like, some of these people are still living or probably, just passed.
And then the thing about it is a lot of the teachings from that era, is still fresh because just like the era of Dr. King's granddaughter only being 6 years old, those same people who were oppressing at those same time have granddaughters that very same age. So it's still...
Let me break it down like this, and this gives you an idea of the time. Slavery was 2 grandmas ago.
Yep.
That's some serious stuff.
Yeah.
2 grandmas ago. You know what I mean? People were still enslaved. And so, you know what I mean? I'm very passionate about history. I love history. I love to read. I love to look around. I have a lot of questions about the world I live in. And history gives me that added context to kind of understand, the world we live in. And so, you can read their work. Like Dr. King wrote books, right? Strength to Love. A lot of books that he wrote, a lot of his speeches. I listen to his speeches. I listen to his sermons. Like the brother and other brothers like him and sisters, because you cannot talk about Dr. King without talking about Ella Baker, because it's interesting. You talk about Ella Baker, who was an advisor for SNCC, and she basically, felt that Dr. King, she said the movement made Martin, not Martin making the movement. You know what I mean? She said that strong people don't need strong leaders. So there was these interesting dichotomies, right? So you had people who felt like Dr. King was too much in front. It shouldn't be, we looking at a leader. We should be developing people so that they can actually do what they need to do.
You know how people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one person always get pushed to the front.
Yeah.
As great as the King was, there's always going to be people who look just like you. Just like we all want the same thing, but nah. I'm like,
agendas get distorted.
Oh, yeah.
Through the process.
For me, I'm gonna keep it short. I love Dr. King too. I'm not the only one. I love Dr. King too. If it wasn't for Dr. King, we wouldn't be right here, doing this. You know what I'm saying? Living in this house with neighbors of all different races that I have. Even though I might still get dirty looks, I don't know. I'm not saying that they do. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that we 100% out the hole, but this is what Dr. Martin Luther King sacrificed for us. Everybody that's down here, everybody that's up there, our families and everybody. He sacrificed that. The man was killed twice. Like, wasn't he like on his deathbed a few years prior?
Oh yeah, he got stabbed.
Got stabbed, survived that because his mission wasn't done. He came back. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I want to say this last thing about Dr. King. So, he's looking around looking for jobs from after he graduated from seminary. So, well, he's not graduated yet. He was about to write his dissertation at Boston University. And, he's looking around for jobs. So he goes to Chattanooga, Tennessee. They had a big church in Chattanooga that was looking for a pastor. And so what's interesting is he applies, he really wants the job, and he doesn't get it. I always think about how sometimes things that don't work out lead to things that do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we would not know Dr. King if he had taken that job in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Facts, all facts.
But like, just imagine how he felt when he got that phone call saying, yo, bruh, we ain't giving you this job in Chattanooga. You got to go to Montgomery. So sometimes, I'm a firm believer that your setbacks can be setups for your comebacks.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, he wouldn't have a holiday. He wouldn't have been in a position to do what he did if he wasn't in Montgomery at that particular point in time.
He definitely was the chosen one. I personally think there was nobody else that could have done that.
Nah.
Sometimes that W was tucked behind that L.
Literally, he did not get that, and he wanted that job. The job in Chattanooga was a bigger church. It was in a bigger town. It was more affluent. So he takes the job in Montgomery, and it's like, and I always think about that when things don't work out for me. I'm always like, this may be my king moment. I may be in this situation, for a higher purpose. And so I always like to tell that story. If things aren't working out now, anybody who's listening to this, sometimes it's a setup for a comeback. And that's some real stuff.
I think about how far set back we would be if Dr. King wasn't who he was. You know what I'm saying? Like with the way things are now, with everything that everyone from the civil rights movement poured into that time period, if that didn't take place, could you imagine? Like if none of that happened, if none of them took the initiative to step forward and actually speak up and be the forefront of the people, like it could be extremely bad in 2018. You know what I'm saying? So it was a very important area in time for our people, because that's literally when things started to transition. People said, I'm not taking this shit no more. Like, fuck that.
No, absolutely. I think that we just have to admire and understand that Dr. King was a part of something larger, right? You can't, like, Dr. King wouldn't have been Dr. King if his father wasn't a minister, at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when you read their biographies, you see, like, Dr. King's father was poor, came to Atlanta, broke, no education. He goes to Morehouse College, right, Dr. King's father, and says, hey, I want to get an education. And they looked at his stuff, and they were like, you ain't got the skills to be here. No, you got to leave. And the president was like, nah, you ain't got what it takes to be at Morehouse. And so, they told him to go home. He was like, nah, I'm not leaving until I get my education. And they ended up letting him stay at Morehouse. He ends up graduating and, becomes a pastor of a church. All this stuff happens. Just imagine if they didn't allow his father at Morehouse. How life would have been different for Dr. King.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, some deep stuff.
I don't even want to think about it.
Very, very deep.
So salute to MLK. MLK 50.
50 years.
50 years, man.
He should still be alive, man. He should still be alive, you know what I mean?